is there anything that you see that 12-step misses out on that is missing the link? Because there's a lot of recidivism rate with 12-step. What piece is that missing? And let's get back into again, why psychedelics specifically as a tool alongside of this? Because we spent all this time and haven't really delved that much into why psychedelics works and why that's a tool for this.
Yeah, I mean, what I think 12 steps have a remarkable offering to people, and like I said, it's free, it's almost universally available. The lots of different types of indications, whether you resonate with being an addict or an alcoholic or a porn addict or whatnot. So what I think is missing in that is some orientations have a little bit of a rigidity to it that doesn't resonate with people at the outset. And quite frankly, as a practitioner, as a professional, I want to go out of my way to make someone feel welcome, regardless of any of the reasons or excuses they might have to feel like they don't belong. So what I think one of the things that the 12-step unfortunately can replicate is that shaming, alienation, and stigmatization, where, as we've been talking about, if someone's not ready to call themselves an addict, well, they're welcome. But if someone's on, methadone maintenance or Suboxone in Narcotics Anonymous, they're explicitly told that you shouldn't share in a meeting because technically you're cutting off that conscious contact with a higher power. You shouldn't chair a meeting. You can't read a piece of paper to facilitate a meeting. You can't be the speaker lead. You can't do significant types of service work, which to me is kind of baffling that they would do that. So
yeah, I do see in the 12 steps, they also, you are, again, you're stigmatized subconsciously as pretty much a victim for life or an addict for life. And I've seen a lot of people, like even in their youth, where if they're labeled as having a learning disability when they're young, that's a story they stick with the rest of your life, that is a limiting self-belief about themselves that lacks empowerment around that area.
Well, what I'll tell you from my experience, so the rehab that I went to was a traditional abstinence-based 12-step model that for some reason cost, tens of thousands of dollars to learn what I could have learned for free in a church basement. But so 10 months of relapsing after that, having this moment with my mother and all of my knowledge about the usefulness of psychedelics and how they may offer something that I was not going to be able to find anywhere else, or perhaps I wasn't yet ready for it. I being broke, unemployable, dropped out of college with no prospects for me, I had to ask and whether this was yet another thing that I could be entitled to receive as a result of my parents' love and support for me. I genuinely just asked if they would pay for an Ibogaine treatment, and as a result of them doing that, I would do something that I wasn't willing to do a year prior, which was live in that halfway house, which was commit to getting whatever job would hire me so I can pay the weekly rent as quickly as possible, to not make them pay for it, go to meetings, get a sponsor, do all the things that my lawyer told me would eventually get me out of trouble when the time came to actually start to advocate for me. So
what led up to that point of realizing there was Ibogaine that you wanted to do? Like where did you start realizing that psychedelics could be in play here?
Well, from my exploration earlier as an adolescent, discovering Arrowwood.org and a wide library of experiences and educational resources about different types of drugs, everything from opiates to Ibogaine and everything in between. So I read the experiences from people, I read the science of it, the pharmacology, and I became so interested in college that I started up a chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy to co-sponsor and host an Ibogaine conference in 2009. So I had quite a bit of knowledge in the utility of Ibogaine to treat substance use disorder, and specifically for opiate use disorder, to actually relieve people of the withdrawal symptoms that essentially serve as one of the best detoxes available. It just happened to precede my own personal addiction, but that knowledge I hung on to allowed me in that moment in 2011 to say, this is what I think might actually help me, because otherwise I can't figure out how to stop. I don't think a methadone or a Suboxone is going to adequately relieve my withdrawal symptoms and turn my course. So I had to go down to Mexico to receive treatment that that met the expectation and the kind of the promise that I had hoped for. I was a broken, desperate, lonely, isolated person who was refusing to really grapple with the sheer reality of how my behaviors had been harming the loved ones around me, even though, you know, I wasn't hurting people, even though I wasn't, you know, I didn't hurt anybody as a result of my behavior. But in that moment of receiving Ibogaine, you know, I had the gift of being relieved from opiate withdrawal. So if you're not using opiates, you know, Ibogaine, it's more safe to detox off of alcohol and benzodiazepines prior to receiving Ibogaine. Stimulants, cocaine and methamphetamine don't quite have that level of physical withdrawal symptoms. They do have some very intense psychological craving that can be manifested in physical discomfort and anxiety and things like that. But for opiates specifically, detoxing with Ibogaine allowed me to relieve that physical dependency, that physical withdrawal syndrome, and elicit an incredibly powerful transformative experience where I spent a night essentially awakening to the parts of me that had been dying as a result of my behaviors, had been crumbled as a result of my inability to figure out how to move past my addiction and actually grow as a person. So I came out of that, what I call the fireworks show, by paying the price for admission, which was being flooded with guilt, shame, and remorse, and a healthy level of those things, allowing myself to put the guardrails down, to be vulnerable alone and feel pain, feel remorse, and desperately want to just communicate with my family like how sorry I was, kind of similar to that anecdote I shared from the Hendricks trial about receiving an experience of awe and needing to share the humility of that with somebody else.